What is up, everyone? It's Orion with Unpossible Game Labs, and today I want to talk to you about what it takes to make a game feature complete. Now, at the end of my last video, I mentioned that I had brought my game to what is called feature complete, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that, what that means, and why I chose to make that decision when moving my project forward. So for me, what feature complete means is that all of my major code systems are complete. They're at least functional and working. Feature complete doesn't mean that they're in the final form that they will ever be, and it doesn't mean that I won't add on to them in the future, but it does mean that things were taken to a state that if they were shipped in that state, I would be happy with, where they were. You might hear a lot of different terms in game development and kind of like wonder what the difference is between them. Feature complete to me means that your coding systems are done. Alpha means that your code is complete, so any code that you need to have in your game is there, and most of your content is there. And to me, beta is when you are content complete. So content complete means that like your stories are written and your art assets are there, your music's there, everything is pretty much there, and you're kind of tweaking and polishing from that point. The first question might be, why do a feature complete at all, right? So there are a couple of reasons that I see for why you would do it like that, and those are generally around scope, cost, and stability of the game. One of the big reasons to go for a feature complete is that once you know kind of like the scope of the game, you understand how much the game is going to cost you to make, and everything else left is content and polish from that point. This is why we use a term like complete, because with game development, you're never 100% done with the project. There's always something more that you could be doing. There's always something more that you could be adding. There's always some more polish that you can be doing. So in a lot of ways, shipped is better than done. So when you're determining completeness, you're figuring out what is a reasonable, kind of viable, shippable product. I'm not going to say minimal viable product, because minimal viable product is usually way, way tighter scoped. This is kind of what is a product that would at least meet the expectations of a modern audience. It may not blow them away, but you've gotten kind of all your bases covered and maybe a couple of bells and whistles and niceties from there. So one of the things that happens with something like this, with hitting feature complete, kind of early compared to when the game's going to be done, things can change. Your technical constraints can change. Maybe I'll find new issues that arise from here on out. But in general, because I've tackled kind of the hardest technical challenges I had first, the likelihood that that will happen is lower. Also, because I'm not shoehorning my systems in at the last minute. These are systems that will, for the next year or two, be in place in the game. This will help promote stability and help to make sure that, like, when this product goes out, what you're getting is something that's functional and well tested. So, what it actually requires to finish the game. Now, the first part is obvious. The game has to be finished, right? So you have to be able to fight your main bosses, you have to be able to get your power-ups and your upgrades, and you have to be able to actually complete the game. So the first part of taking this game to feature completion was just that. It was just making sure that you can fight every boss, get every Metroidvania-style upgrade or unlock, and that you could walk through the final boss's door, complete that, and roll credit. This doesn't mean that the credits are even in their final form. In fact, right now it's essentially just a thank you screen. The important thing is that problem of how do you roll credits has been solved. There are Unity assets I can pick up for that. That's a relatively low lift from a programming perspective. The more important thing was to, one, just make sure that the logic works from that point on, and two, it forced me to figure out what happens when you complete the game. Depending on which game you're playing, there's a lot of different ways to approach this. Some games will do like a new game plus. Some games will allow you to come back into the game and pick up the story after you've killed the final boss. Part of doing the feature complete for me was making sure that you could go in, finish the game, get a save file. That save file gets marked complete, and then you can kind of go back into that save file and continue working on whatever you want to finish up. And I'll let you play the game to figure out like exactly what happens when you beat it and how that whole system works. So gameplay aside, there's a lot of boring stuff that you need to work on. Let's just go through some of it so that, when you're doing your project, you're not underestimating just how much you need to do. One of the big ones I would say is localization. Now, to define localization, localization is when your game is able to display multiple languages. This is tied to a broader term called internationalization. And kind of the difference is localization is just translating the game to whatever language, Chinese, Japanese, Italian, like whatever. Internationalization is when you go a step further and you create the systems in the game around the expectations of the culture that you're going into. So, for example, if you've ever played a Nintendo game, you'll notice that the A and B buttons are swapped, or different cultures use different symbols to suggest, yes or no, or things like that. Maybe there's different colors in different languages, or things of that nature. Now, it's up to you to decide just how far you're going to go with these types of things, be it localization or internationalization. At the very least, you're probably going to want to go with some form of localization, especially if you're doing something like Steam. There is an international audience out there. I think if you can reach a broader audience and the lift is not super heavy, then might as well go for it. So localization was actually baked into Kindred Kind pretty early in the process, and that is a whole thing I could go over at some point if you guys are interested. But I would say do it early because it just affects so much your workflow, how you decide to do your localization, and do localization very early if you get a chance. The next thing that you want to think about is settings. This is not necessarily the first project that you want to work on when you're working on a new game, but having a settings menu and being able to go in and change all the appropriate settings is super important. Settings would be anything from, sound, volume, sound mixers, muting, resolution, full screen, screen hurt, VSync, button remapping. Button remapping is a huge one. I put that off for a really long time. One of the things I tried to put into the game was a fairly robust accessibility menu. So people have the options to tweak the game's difficulty and into a way that they like it. Regardless, you want to make it so that your game can be used by as many people as possible. And this will help you if you do this early, because you're going to have playtesters, you're going to have to give it to people. And so giving people the ability to troubleshoot their own problems is going to save you kind of dividends in the long run. Another system that I had to put together for this particular game was the mapping system. This is one of those that I didn't finish to 100% completion, but you do want to know the broad strokes of how the whole system works. So you do want to see it working from front to back, and you do want some version of mapping to be present in the game, kind of all the way through the game. If players can't play your game and they get lost and they don't know where they are, then feedback that they're going to give you is going to be probably more harsh than the game deserves. So thinking about getting the mapping done before you release to playtesters just kind of save them a little bit of headache. The next core system that I'd say that you need to have working is your saving system. This is saving system and file management. So people need to be able to create new games, be able to delete games. You need to be able to clean up anything that you leave behind on the user's hard drive. So for example, I take screenshots when they're playing the game. And so I needed to be able to have a way to keep those in check so you're not just leaving extra gunk on people's hard drives as they're testing your game. And while you're at it, while you're already working on a save system, I would suggest go ahead and thinking just about data in general, data collection, data management. One of the things I built in pretty early into Kindred Kind was the ability to take a save file that a person has played on their computer, put it onto my computer, and resume the game from where they left off, so I can see exactly what bugs they're seeing, see what state that they're in. While you're at it, if people are going to be giving you save files anyway, might as well have a fairly robust metric system in there so you can see maybe like how often people died, where people are dying, what they're interacting with, what they're not interacting with. So you can get those kind of metric collection to figure out where to tweak your game from there. And kind of the final piece to my metrics and saving system is the feedback system. I have a form that you can go to through the menu, and you write a message that goes into my bug reports, and I can take a look at not just the screenshot of where you were when you hit the issue, but it will also send me the save file so I can load up where you were at the time that you sent the feedback and potentially debug the issue from right there. So speaking of the feedback loop, final piece of that feedback loop that I added in was have a version number on the title screen. And that version, the game will actually check against the internet to see what the latest version of the game out is. and it will let your testers know that, hey, a new version is available for them to download if you want them to, know that a bug has been fixed and they can now check out the newest build. The next system that I worked on in order to get to a feature complete state was a cutscene management system. Cutscene management is one of those kind of tricky things in games. It's another one of those things that you might want to figure out early, because if you don't, what ends up happening is that you solve each instance of a cutscene, each instance of, when you walk in a room, and what happens afterwards is a little bit different. And these can lead to these kinds of one-off bugs that can be really hard to figure out. Cutscenes don't necessarily mean like full motion video or animation or anything like that. It just means that, anything where you want a sequence of actions to happen after you've taken control away from the player. Finally, one of the things that I worked on was onboarding. Onboarding's tricky because the game is going to change over the next year and a half. Things are going to change, systems have changed. There's actually a couple of abilities I added really recently to the game. So this was after I had even gotten to a feature complete state. And so you want to strike a balance when it comes to your onboarding. You don't want to write in stone exactly all of the manuals and tutorials and all that kind of stuff, because you are going to change them as you move forward. But you do want to give people at least resources to kind of unstick themselves if they're playtesting your game. This is where you have the advantage that your playtesters are probably more committed than your average individual to playing your game. So at this stage in the game, my solution was to just have a guide system so that people can look through the guide and learn about the systems. So eventually you're going to want a more robust onboarding system, but when you're kind of first starting out, you want to at least have some basic way of getting people onboarded, even if it's not the exact final systems. So there you go. This was everything that it took to get the game to a feature complete state. These aren't the most fun or sexy parts of the project. In fact, a lot of them, you really just kind of like drag your feet and you just kind of have to make yourself work on them. If you enjoy fun technical challenges, I do think they are actually like interesting pieces of technical work to do. So like the localization system or a cinematic system, or even in some ways having kind of a robust guide system can be interesting technical challenges, but they're not the most flashy. But I will say that ultimately it will pay dividends if you're serious about, game development, or at least releasing your game. If you're just kind of like making a game for fun and you're just experimenting and you're still learning, and making it a commercial product isn't as important to you, then, this isn't the most important step. I did the feature complete work after I had found the fun in the game. So I had programmed in most of the core fun systems, like the different weapons, weapon switching, magic systems, charm systems, before I'd ever started to think about some of the more intricate systems. But once you think that you have a game that you think that you're going to want to release to people, working on this stuff earlier in the process will allow you to really kind of finalize those systems and make sure that they're super stable and not a chore to work on. Sometimes it's a pain in the ass to work on these systems, so the earlier that you kind of get them out of the way, then when you do find bugs or iterations or things that you can work on, it's a much, much smaller task, as opposed to pushing it all to the end, rushing to get it out, and oh no, there's a thing that's not working. Man, there's yet another thing to fix, or yet another. I have to push myself even harder on the system that I didn't want to work on. So there you have it. That is how I got my game to feature complete. Let me know if there's anything that you think that I missed in terms of getting this game to a feature complete state. Again, we're talking technical, not visual. That's very clearly not how the final game is going to look. But in terms of what you expect a complete and functional video game to be working, to have in it before it ships to you. Okay, so that is all for now. Until next time, I will see you later. Peace.